ﷺ being given to Amina bintu Wahab after, of course, Halima Sadiya being fearful that she cannot take care of him because of the story when he actually had the open chest incident. Now, the Prophet ﷺ started working as a shepherd in order to help his uncle Abu Talib get his income settled. It wasn't enough, but it was at least giving him some food and covering up some of the different expenses. It wasn't just the Prophet ﷺ working, but it was the other boys, but that was still barely making it. Now, time passed by. The Prophet ﷺ, he's how old is he right now? 8 years old. Now his grandfather Abdul Muttalib dies. All right, his grandfather Abdul Muttalib dies, and of course it was time for the Prophet ﷺ to continue with Abu Talib and continue with the rest in taking care of him because he was still too young. Now, time passes by. The Prophet ﷺ was getting into learning how to do business. He wasn't an expert, but his uncle Abu Talib would take him along to Medina. To Syria. He was getting used to how does traveling happen. He only went to Syria once, saw the people there, met some things there, but didn't really engage a lot. But it wasn't long because it was getting some merchandise and heading back all the way to Medina, all the way to Mecca. Now, it's important to say that there is a famous story. I'm going to say the story, but listen to this. I'm going to say the story, but the story, although widely mentioned, but it's actually not authentic. But I'm going to say the story anyhow. The story goes like this. Abu Talib was with the Prophet ﷺ in Syria. In the middle of the way, a guy named Bahira sees the Prophet ﷺ and says to his Abu Talib, to his uncle, and tells him, listen, your nephew, is going to be one day a big, magnificent thing. So be careful. The Jews are going to somehow find a different way to kill him. So be careful. And Abu Talib is there just listening to Bahira. Now, this story is actually not authentic. Bahira himself, and even the story goes farther that Abu Bakr and even Bilal were there. The story is actually not authentic. Bilal was not even there, not even with Abu Talib, and neither was Abu Bakr, and no authentic reference actually tells us about Bahira. Anyhow, fast forward, the Prophet ﷺ now is 25 years old. By the way, he was friends with Abu Bakr. What was his name? Abdullah ibn Quhafa. He was always friends with Abu Bakr, even from his early childhood, always friends with Abu Bakr. Abu Bakr was this honest boy who would always be around the Prophet ﷺ. One day, he even wanted to join. There was like a music concert, but every time he would want to join, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts him to sleep because that's not something that a prophet or a prophet to be would do. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would put him to sleep. Fast forward. Muhammad ﷺ was now almost 25 years old. But there was this very rich lady that he decided to work for. How does he work for her? So he takes her merchandise, and some of the merchandise he takes it and goes and sells it in Syria and brings some merchandise to Khadija. But Khadija wasn't sure that this worker was going to be the best worker. So she sends along Maysara. Yes, she did ask about him, and everybody was telling her that his name, because he was such a trustworthy person, that he was called Al-Amin, the trustworthy one. But still, she was like, well, that's a lot of money for me to trust him with. I'll send along with him one of my trusted boys. His name was Maysara. What was his name? Maysara. Maysara, I want you to go with Muhammad. Yes, sallallahu yes, he is trustworthy according to all the people, but that's a lot of money for me to trust him with. I want you to make sure that he's really going to take care of everything. All right. Maysara goes, takes the merchandise and brings merchandise and buys other merchandise with Khadija's money. Comes back and says, Maysara, I want you to take this money. This is how much profit we made. This is the money that we didn't use. And this is the merchandise that we managed to buy. Here's a whole list of inventory. This is what we got. Maysara, go take it to Khadija and give her, we were working for her, and this is how much I would get paid out of all this money, deducted how much he would get paid, deducted what was, of course, costing the trip and everything, and gave all the information. Maysara goes to Khadija. Who was at Khadija's home? It was none other but her sister, Hala. Hala, her sister, was really overhearing all of this. And Hala said, Khadija, you already have been married before, and you are older. Was it 40? Not quite authentic evidence on the number 40, but she was older than Muhammad. So Hala suggested, listen, you saw that this man was very trustworthy, and you saw this man was a very smart and a decent man. How about you propose to him in marriage? What? Me propose to him in marriage? Well, yeah, he's a good man. He's not a guy to miss. He's trustworthy. He's a good man. He's smart. He's handsome too. Why not? So Hala suggested to Sister Khadija, her sister Khadija, that Khadija told Maysara, tell him that I'm interested in getting married to him. But Muhammad ﷺ, he didn't want to make the decision right away because he had to get consultation from those that have experience. This is a marriage. You don't just make a decision, even if you're a man. So he went to Abu Talib and he said, well, that she's actually proposing to me. Should I accept? He didn't just make his own decision. Abu Talib said, well, this woman is a noble woman. We know that she's a woman of principle. She's a woman of good character. She's pretty, and she's a woman that is a noble woman. Go for it. So Muhammad ibn Abdullah then gets married to Khadija. She's older. than him. But yes, she's got characters. She's got certain traits that no other woman has. He gets married to Khadija, and they would get children. Kulthum, Ruqayya, Zainab, and Fatima. And to Abdullah, we'd get Abdullah and Al-Qasim. Well, the two sons later on died, but that's a big family, mashallah. And not only that, but he was also taking care of someone else. That was Ali. Ali ibn Abi Talib would come in and actually live in the Prophet's household. There was someone else too. Who was it? It was Zayd ibn Haritha. Who's that? He sure has a different name. Zayd ibn Haritha. The story of Zayd. Zayd was a slave boy. The slave boy, Khadija's uncle, his name was Khuzama. Was it? No, not Khuzama. Hold on. Khuzama, something. Forgot the name. No. No, he wasn't from Khuwaylid. I'll get the name. It'll come. He basically bought the slave as a gift. Well, certainly he didn't put him in a gift bag, but he just was like, oh, we'll give her this gift. And he brings in Zayd. But the Prophet ﷺ couldn't handle seeing that Zayd, Abdullah ibn, was Hakim ibn Khuzam. That was her uncle's name. So he basically, the Prophet ﷺ, he couldn't handle seeing that Zayd ibn Haritha was a slave boy. So he decided he wants to adopt him as a son. So he adopts him as a son. And then he was named Zayd ibn Muhammad. Everybody would know him as Zayd ibn Muhammad. He adopted him. But Zayd, his family was not known. It wasn't until later that his family had basically been told that Zayd was actually found. What happened to Zayd? Well, he was going with his mother to visiting her family's house, and then some kind of a tribe invaded her family's tribe, and they kidnapped Zayd. And then he was sold. But certainly Hakim ibn Khuzam didn't know that. But he was later found. Other people, they're like, I know that child. His family is looking for him. So the Prophet ﷺ said, well, I'm going to let you go if you want. I'll let you choose. Zayd's family came over and they said, we're taking back our son. He was kidnapped and we're not going to leave him with anybody. So the Prophet ﷺ, Zayd ibn Haritha, was now approximately 12, 13 years old. So the Prophet ﷺ, after taking care of Zayd, he said, Zayd, you're 12 years old now. You can make decisions. Do you want to go to your families or do you want to stay with us? Remember, we're not that rich. And those are your family. What do you choose? So Zayd chose to stay with the Prophet ﷺ. Zayd stays with the Prophet ﷺ. But Zayd always had deep love for the Prophet ﷺ, and Khadija was like a mother to him. Fast forward, the Prophet ﷺ, every single day, he would basically have people knocking at the door and asking him whether it's a financial support or sometimes even keeping their money for the Prophet ﷺ to save it for him and to keep their stuff with him. Why? Because he's al-Amin. One day, the Kaaba needed renovation. What were we going to do? If we don't renovate it, the whole thing is going to collapse. It's going to collapse over us. What should we do? So they decided, well, what we need to do, we're going to renovate the Kaaba. And we know this place is sacred. Maybe if we were to do anything, that Allah's curse would come at us. So let us start and see who would be willing to try the first shot. One after another, they discovered that, hey, it wasn't collapsing over our heads. Maybe that is okay to do, renovate the Kaaba. But they come across a dilemma. We've got the black stone. The black stone, we know it's sacred somehow. At least they didn't know why it was sacred. So if one person were going to carry it, that might give him the honor and some kind of a preference over other people. So they decided, we'll just choose the first one that comes in between the doors that surround Mecca. So what did they do? They basically said the first one to come in is the one that's going to carry the stone. So who comes in? The Prophet ﷺ. They didn't anticipate that. Right away they said, oh, it's al-Amin. It's the trustworthy one. It's the guy we always trust. But the Prophet ﷺ had a plan. So that way, not one particular person is taking the honor. We could all share the honor. So what would we do? We would put the black stone on a fabric or a sheet, and each and every single one would carry the sheet together. That way, we would all share the honor. We would all make this a community sponsorship for all of us to do this together. They put the black stone together and everyone was happy. Time passes by. The Prophet ﷺ was not yet a prophet. He didn't like all that was going on in Mecca. Around Mecca, people were gambling, people were abusing one another, people were killing little girls. It was not something that he was liking, but he didn't have any solution and certainly didn't want to adopt their lifestyle, but didn't know what to do. It wasn't until he would basically find an escape to all of this, and he would go to a mountain called Hira. What was the mountain called? Hira. The mountain is really high, and certainly you needed to climb up and high and needed to climb, and sometimes it would take hours to climb. But he was seeing the world from a different angle. Way up, he would take some food for 3 days and just stay up. Every once in a while, he would make that as a habit of being in seclusion, being alone, and just taking some time to just practice a form of meditation. What was that meditation? We don't really know. Until one day, he got an angel, but he didn't know that that was an angel. It was something that to him, that was looking extremely scary. It would hold him tight and it would say, read. And he would say, but I cannot read. How am I going to read? I can't read. I'm an illiterate man. Hold him even tighter and say, read. And he would say, well, I cannot read. And hold him even tighter and tighter. Read. And he said, but I can't read. I'm an illiterate man. What am I going to read? He attempted to run away. But then Jibreel tells him, اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق. اقرأ وربك الأكرم. Read in the name of your Lord that created man. Read in the name of your Lord that is the most generous. اقرأ وربك الأكرم الذي علم بالقلم علم الإنسان ما لم يعلم. اقرأ, read, and your Lord Almighty had created the pen, something for you to use to learn more and more, of course. And he taught you what you did not know. You've got the intellect, you've got the intelligence, but certainly Prophet Muhammad didn't know any of what this is. That sure was very scary. He tries to get out of that cave, but then every time he would want to get out of the cave, the angel with the wings spread were all that his eyes could see. Everywhere that he could look, he would see the wings and he would see this creature filling up the horizon. He got so scared. But then later, basically managed, after it disappeared, managed to run down and scurry down the mountain. Who was he going to go to? He was going to go to Khadija. Why would you go to Khadija? Why would you go to Khadija? Because Khadija, his wife, was a woman that he really trusted. He was shivering so hard, and she said, well, what happened? He said, well, just cover me. Cover me. I'm so scared. It was something that he had never seen before or heard of before. So Khadija asked him, tell me the story. What happened? He told her what he had seen. And he thought it was probably a dangerous demon coming to attack him. And she said, or maybe it was God, after all, angry at him, wanting to retaliate for something that he might have done wrong. And she said, no, by Allah, the Lord Almighty would not put you down, would not whatsoever harm you, because you would take care of the orphans, you would take care of the needy, and you would always be there for those that are in need, and you're always a person that is trustworthy. But I've got an idea who probably might have a better explanation to this. Waraq ibn Nawfal. Waraq ibn Nawfal was an older man. Remember the Ahnaf that we talked about? He was that. Waraq ibn Nawfal was an older man who wasn't just an older man. He was a person that was reading from the scriptures of the Jews and the Christians. So Waraq ibn Nawfal interviews the Prophet ﷺ, tell me your story and tell me what happened. So he tells him, Waraq ibn Nawfal says, well, this is actually the time you are going to be chosen as a prophet. A prophet? What is that? He tells him, well, you see the creature that you had seen? That's the same creature that had come before you. He called him in Namus. He said, that's the same creature that had come before you unto all the other prophets that came before you. Ibrahim, Musa, and Isa. Who are those? He said, well, they were prophets that the Lord Almighty had chosen in order to deliver the message of why people were created. And he said, well, I'll deliver the message. He said, well, it's not going to be that easy. No prophet had come with the message, but he was opposed. He was attacked. He was rejected. You're going to find a lot of rejection. If I were a young man, if I were capable of giving you all the power to support you, I would do so. Waraq ibn Nawfal was already a very old man. Any day he would die. He was already barely walking, barely moving, struggling to probably breathe, but he managed to tell him this information. The Prophet ﷺ said, well, I'm going to put in all my effort to deliver the message, no matter what it takes. Later, the Prophet ﷺ, oh wow, it's 1:20. How about we end here? All right. And next week, you'll come back and we'll continue the story from where we left off. Fair enough? Yes. Or should we continue now? Questions? Go ahead, my dear. You don't? Okay. Let me ask you some questions really fast. The Prophet ﷺ's wife that he got married to, her name was, raise your hand, don't answer. Khadija bintu Khuwaylid. Khadija bintu Khuwaylid. Who was the one that suggested that the Prophet ﷺ would marry Khadija? Her sister Hala. Good job. Her sister Hala. The Prophet ﷺ's mother's name is Amina bint she. Go ahead. Amina bint Wahab. Go ahead, my dear. Hala was Khadija's sister, but good try. Let's ask another question. There was a boy that was kidnapped as a slave, and later he basically was adopted by the Prophet ﷺ. What's his name? Zayd ibn Haritha. Good job. There was a guy that Khadija sent along with the Prophet ﷺ to basically watch out. Maysara. See, they got smart kids. She wants to try too. Oh, sorry, I didn't see that. Sorry, I can't see from far, dear. So sorry, everybody. Okay, let's do another. Oh, some people are answering even from far. Oh, good. I wish, but the kids, they've been here from 11. I think they're really tired. All right, let's continue. Another question. Ready? Ready? The Prophet ﷺ had a best friend from early childhood. What was his name? Abu Bakr. What was his first name and his dad's name? So Abu Bakr was his nickname. That wasn't his name when he was a little boy. What was his name? Should we try? A, B, or C? Was it Abdullah ibn Qahafa? Was it Uthman bin Affan? Was it Umar ibn al-Khattab? Which one is it? Hamza. Okay. Hamza ibn his name was Abdullah ibn Qahafa. Good job. Okay. The Prophet ﷺ was nursed by a lady. Well, two ladies, actually. What were their names? There was another lady. Halima Sa'diyya. Good job. There was another lady. What was the other lady's name?
It starts with a th.
Starts with a th.
Thuwayba.
Thuwayba. I love that girl. Hold. All right. All right. Should we do another question? Okay. The Prophet ﷺ's uncle takes care of him after the death of his mother. What was his name? Hold on, I want to see. Hamza. Abu Talib. Abu Talib. What were the Prophet ﷺ's daughter's name from Khadija? Tell me a name, at least one. Fatima, here's one. Zainab, there's two.
Oh, I know there's Zainab.
Okay.
Ruqayya.
Ruqayya. Kulthum. Wait, she has a name. Hold on. Kulthum. Good job. She guessed the name. And Fatima. And Fatima. All right. He did have two boys. Al-Qasim. Who was older? Abdullah or Al-Qasim? Al-Qasim. That's why the Prophet's nickname is Abu Al-Qasim.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Right? All right. One more question, and that's going to be the last question. Ready? Okay. The Prophet ﷺ was nursed by Thuwayba with another relative of his. Who was that? Hamza ibn Abdul Muttalib. I know this girl was paying attention. Yep, good job. This is it.
A little birdie is helping.
What are you talking about? All right. Yeah, look at those. They answered the questions. Good job. Good job. So next week, inshallah, please be here at 11 so we can continue the stories. We're going to continue the story on and on and on, inshallah, every single week. Before I travel, we should be finished with all the seerah. All right? And go ahead, my dear Baturu.
No, assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
I have a question. Before I knew that the Kaaba was built by Ibrahim alayhi salam. But lately, when I was reading some stories with the kids, we saw in the book that it was created by Adam alayhi salam, and then Ibrahim alayhi salam just rebuilt it. I got confused.
Yes, that is true.
I don't know if it's only for the
And there were
Okay, that's
differences of opinions between scholars. That's right. There were differences of opinions between scholars whether the Malaika built it or even Adam alayhi salam built it. All right. So we'll see you all next week, inshallah. Sunday at 11. All right. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Yeah, Aisha, your parents are here?